I knew something was off the second my Outlook calendar pinged with a mandatory sync meeting at 9:13 a.m. on a random-ass Tuesday. Not 9 o'clock, not 9:159:13, like they were trying to catch me emotionally off balance. I clicked into the invite and felt my stomach clench. It was from Greg in HR. Subject line, realignment strategy touchpoint. That's corporate code for we're about to screw you without dinner or a kiss. When I walked into conference room B, the air smelled like new carpet glue and betrayal. Greg was already there, perched like a smug gargoyle on the corner of the table, and next to him, my boss, Martin. 12 years I gave that man. And there he was, eyes glued to a lukewarm cup of Starbucks like it held the meaning of life. Couldn't even look at me. Greg smiled like a used car salesman in a recession. Ashley, thanks for coming. I know this is short notice. My chair was already pulled out. They don't do that unless it's a firing, or a performance improvement plan, or a ritual sacrifice, apparently. Then came the speech. Oh, the speech. As part of our ongoing efforts to streamline operational efficiency and enhance cross-functional synergies, your role has been identified as redundant in the new org structure. Translation: we don't want to pay your senior salary anymore, so we found a college intern with a spreadsheet fetish to do your job for half the cost and none of the experience. I blinked. Once, twice, waiting for Martin to say something, anything. But he just nodded like a malfunctioning bobblehead, refusing to raise those cowardly, watery eyes from his latte. I think I blacked out for a second because the next thing I knew, Greg was sliding a folder toward me like he was dealing blackjack at a table no one wanted to be at. Here's your separation packet, he said, as if he were handing me a party favor bag at a 6-year-old's birthday. You'll find the terms of your severance agreement inside, as well as information about COBRA coverage and final paycheck disbursement. We appreciate your service. Appreciate. That word hit me like a brick made of dry sarcasm and broken promises. Then came the kicker. As I opened my mouth, just barely, mind you, to ask why, Martin stood up like the meeting was already over. Greg will walk you out, he said, and bolted out the door like it was on fire. Walk me out, like I was a damn shoplifter. Like I hadn't trained 3 different departments through 2 acquisitions and a platform migration. Greg stood up and did that awkward HR half-smile that's supposed to say this isn't personal but really just screams I got a bonus for this. I barely remember collecting my things. My nameplate, a cracked coffee mug from the All Hands in 2014, a framed picture of my dog Maple in a Santa hat, the little cactus from my windowsill that Greg told me I couldn't take because technically it was company property. I took it anyway. Come at me, Greg. And as I walked out of the only job I'd ever truly given a damn about, through the sterile halls that still had my fingerprints all over their success stories, a single thought screamed in my skull louder than the heels clacking behind me. They didn't just fire me. They erased me. Hey, if you've made it this far, you're already part of the 3% who don't ghost me like Greg did. 97% of folks watching don't subscribe, and I'm chasing my first 10,000 subscribers like it's a severance package that actually respects me. So smash that button like your HR and I just asked for fair pay. Back at my apartment, I sat on the floor with the box of my career on one side and Maple on the other. She licked my hand like she knew. I'd always imagined I'd leave that job on my own terms. Instead, I left with a paper packet, a passive-aggressive branded pen, and a deep, gnawing sense of injustice. But here's the thing about being kicked down: eventually you stop falling. Eventually you start crawling through the fine print, and sometimes, buried in the rubble, you find a clause, a loophole, a spark. I just didn't know it yet. But they were about to make the most expensive mistake of their quarter, maybe even the year. I didn't sleep that night, not even a little. My brain was a tumbled dryer set to rage spin, cycling through every PowerPoint deck I ever saved their ass with. Every weekend I worked through so Martin could unplug with the family. Every time I stayed silent when Greg botched another diversity initiative by handing out reusable tote bags with the company logo like that fixed anything. By 3:47 a.m., I had 2 tabs open comparing severance norms for senior employees in our industry and a Word doc titled What I Deserve. Spoiler alert, it was not what Greg had slipped into that manila folder like a fast food napkin. I showed up to my own execution looking like a woman prepared for court, not a consultation. I had printouts, annotated PDFs, a binder with stickies. I even wore the navy blazer they gave me at the 10-year anniversary party, just to twist the knife a little. Greg was already seated, sipping Diet Coke like it was communion wine. His expression, mix of corporate boredom and smug inevitability. He didn't say hello. He said, let's make this quick. I opened with the numbers. Greg, I began, calm, collected, despite the volcano eating my stomach lining. For someone with my tenure and level, industry standards range between 3 to 6 months of severance. What you're offering barely covers Cobra and a month of rent. He smiled like a robot programmed for fake empathy. I understand this is difficult, Ashley, but unfortunately, it's standard policy. I blinked. Okay, but we both know standard policy isn't a legal term. I've seen employees in marketing walk out with twice this after 2 years. He didn't even flinch. That's confidential and I can't discuss other severance agreements. What I can tell you is that this is what we offer in your situation. It's non-negotiable. That phrase, non-negotiable, it hit me like a flat note in a breakup song. He might as well have said, "You know you're worth more, but we're betting you won't fight us." I leaned in. "So after 12 years, I get 2 weeks' pay, a pamphlet about mental health services, and a reminder that I'm replaceable?" Greg did his best benevolent HR goblin face. "Ashley, you're not replaceable. You're valued. We appreciate your contributions. Then why are you shoveling me out the door like I just pissed on the server rack?" Silence. He opened his mouth, thought better of it, then recited again like a chant. "I'm sorry, Ashley, but it's standard policy. It's not personal." My laughter startled even me. A hard, bitter bark. "Oh, it's not personal? You want to tell that to the 12 Christmas parties I planned? The departmental budgets I salvaged with duct tape and caffeine? The time I rewrote your diversity slide deck because you spelled inclusion wrong?" Greg's nostrils flared, which was the closest I've ever seen him get to a human emotion. "Understand you're upset, but this is the offer. It's final." And that's when it hit me they never expected me to ask. They put a price on my silence and assumed I'd be too broken, too tired, too loyal to question it, that I'd slink away with my little box of memories and cry into LinkedIn job alerts. But I wasn't just angry. I was insulted. They weren't even trying to pretend this was fair. They wanted clean hands and a quiet exit, a quick burial. No mess. No noise, no trace. Greg pushed the folder across the table again like it was a peace offering. "Just sign and we can get your final paycheck processed." I stared at it. At the half-assed severance, the NDA clause, the line that said I waived all future claims against the company. And something in my chest, something old and flammable, lit itself on fire. "I'll review it," I said flatly, standing. Greg blinked. "You're not signing? Not today. Not until I have someone else look at it." His face twitched. "You're entitled to seek counsel, of course. But just so you know, nothing will change. It's standard Poli if you say that phrase one more time. I cut in, I swear to God I will tattoo it across your forehead in Comic Sans." I walked out, binder in hand, head high. And for the first time since they'd yanked the floor out from under me, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like a woman who was done playing nice. I'd never realized how many damn company documents I'd hoarded until I started feeding them to the shredder like they owed me money. Manuals, memos, old pay stubs, pointless employee appreciation certificates, they all went through the blades in a cathartic blur. Somewhere between the 2020 performance goals and my 10-year anniversary card, signed by people who clearly couldn't be bothered to learn how to spell my name right, I opened a second bottle of wine and gave myself permission to spiral. My living room looked like the aftermath of a tax audit, and a nervous breakdown had a baby. Maple, my dog, sat on the couch with the same quiet judgment I imagined Greg's HR handbook was full of. I raised my glass to her. To 12 years of loyalty, I slurred, and 2 weeks of severance. Cheers, corporate America. The shredder jammed halfway through a stack of quarterly vision alignment handouts, and I took that as a cosmic sign to sit the hell down. My fingers hurt, my heart ached. I had nothing left to prove and nothing worth keeping. Except, buried in an old leather accordion folder wedged behind a stack of unused business cards, I found it, my original employment offer, dated February 6, 2012. The paper was yellowed at the corners, still carrying the faint chemical scent of HR printer ink and hope. I remember signing it while buzzing with excitement. I'd just gotten out of a miserable job at a startup where the CEO thought benefits meant access to his Spotify account. This offer had felt like real security. I flipped through the pages half-drunk, expecting nothing but standard jargon and broken promises. The base salary, the vacation accrual, already irrelevant. The part about the ergonomic assessment I never got. And then, deeper in, past the NDA clause and the forced arbitration agreement, in a section I'd skipped 12 years ago because my eyes had glazed over halfway through, all unvested shares under the Employee Equity Incentive Plan shall become fully vested upon termination of employment by the company without cause. I blinked, then blinked again. Wait, what? I read it 5 more times, each word slowly burning into my brain like a sunrise you weren't expecting. Fully vested upon termination without cause. Greg's exact words had been, "This restructuring isn't about performance. It's not personal." Meaning they didn't fire me for cause. Meaning every single one of those shares, those dusty, forgotten, unvested shares from the initial grant and every refresh they slipped in over the years could now be mine. Not maybe, not subject to review, not pending approval. Mine. Hope isn't always warm and gentle. Sometimes it comes sharp-edged and trembling, the way lightning splits a dead tree. I sat frozen for a long moment, gripping that paper like it might vanish if I moved. A crack began to form in the heavy cloud of despair hanging over me, just a sliver of light, but it was enough. I fumbled for my phone and took a picture of the clause. Then I took another. Then a video, just in case the universe decided to crash my phone out of spite. I didn't know the value of the shares off the top of my head. I didn't know how many were still technically pending, or what the market price looked like post-acquisition. But I did know one thing. Greg and his smug little folder had just handed me a legal loaded gun. And they were too arrogant to realize they'd put the bullet in the chamber themselves. I Googled employment lawyer equity clause and fell down a rabbit hole of LinkedIn bios and Yelp reviews, but none of them felt right until I saw her name. Brenda Choi, boutique employment law specialist. Worked out of a modest suite above a laundromat. No flashy graphics, no bullshit slogans, just 5-star reviews and one testimonial that said, Brenda made my old company wish they'd never hired me. Perfect. I didn't sleep much that night either. But this time, it wasn't because I was spiraling. It was because I was planning. The law office looked like it hadn't been redecorated since Bush was in office, the first one. No glass doors, no espresso machine, no receptionists in pencil skirts offering cucumber water. Just a scratched wooden placard that read Brenda Choi-esque, and a bell that sounded like it belonged in an old-timey general store. I rang it once. Nothing. Rang it again and heard a muffled voice from behind a door. Yeah, I heard you. Come in unless you're selling toner. I stepped inside and immediately tripped over a box labeled Deposition Transcripts 2016. The whole place smelled like strong coffee and overworked laser printers. A fan whirred in the corner, oscillating over a precarious tower of manila folders. Behind a cluttered desk sat a woman in a flannel shirt and Converse sneakers, reading something on a tablet with one eye narrowed like it owed her money. Brenda Choi looked nothing like the Harvard-polished lawyers I had imagined during my insomnia-fueled Googling. She looked like she could beat someone at poker and then represent them in court the next day. You're Ashley, she said without standing. My friend Jamie says you got hosed. Sit down. Let's hear the damage. I hesitated for a beat. The wine-fueled confidence from last night had worn off, and suddenly I felt like maybe I'd overreacted, like maybe the clause wasn't as powerful as I hoped, like maybe I'd made a fool of myself. But then Brenda raised an eyebrow and gestured with her pen. Clock's ticking, and I don't do emotional support. I do legal blood sport, talk, so I talked. I laid it all out, the surprise firing, the cardboard box, Greg's smirk, the 2-week severance that wouldn't even cover my Cobra premiums. And finally, I handed her the copy of my offer letter. Page 6, I said, last paragraph. She didn't react at first, just read, then reread, and set the paper down slowly and leaned back like a lion after spotting a limping gazelle. Tell me they didn't include this clause in your separation agreement. They didn't, I said. They didn't mention shares at all. Her smile was slow, wicked, and full of something electric. Oh, they are going to regret being so standard. Something inside me clicked. It wasn't just that I'd found a lawyer. I'd found my lawyer. Brenda wasn't here to gently negotiate. She was here to wreck houseplints and take names. They might argue it doesn't apply to you anymore, I said, my voice unsure despite the caffeine and adrenaline trying to prop me up. Brenda snorted. They can argue the moon's made of cheese. Doesn't mean it'll hold up in arbitration. This clause is clean, airtight, and stupidly specific. You were terminated without cause. These shares are yours. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding since the day I was fired. She steepled her fingers. What we do next depends on one thing. Do you want a check or do you want vengeance? I blinked. Can I say both? Brenda's grin widened. Now you're speaking my language. She pulled a legal pad toward her and began writing furiously. We're not just going to ask for the shares. We're going to frame this around their negligence. The fact that they omitted a material clause in your severance. The standard policy line is going to be our Trojan horse. You think they'll panic? Oh, honey, she said, flipping to a new page. They'll panic so hard Greg might finally break a sweat. The energy in that tiny office was shifting. Gone was the helpless, discarded version of me that had walked through their doors with a copy of her own damn death sentence. In her place sat a woman with ammo, a target, and a partner who clearly got off on strategic warfare. I want them to know they underestimated me, I whispered. Brenda looked up. They will. Second they open my letter, they'll realize they didn't fire an employee. They created a shareholder with a grudge. She paused, and grudge-holding shareholders? She chuckled. They're my favorite kind. The next few days crawled by like a tax season hangover. Brenda had warned me, once I start writing, don't hover. Let the hunter hunt. Easy for her to say, she was in predator mode. I, on the other hand, was stuck pacing my apartment like a Roomba with emotional damage. At 9 a.m. on Monday, I was high on hope, visualizing the look on Greg's face when the email hit his inbox. By noon, I was refreshing the stock market app and calculating how many shares I might get and what they might be worth, and what I'd do with the money, pay off my car, move to Oregon, buy a waffle truck, whatever. By 2 p.m., I was Googling can companies void equity clauses retroactively, and spiraling into legal forums that might as well have been written in Klingon. I called Brenda. She picked up on the third ring, sounding like someone who had just woken up from a nap mid-sentence. Don't tell me you've been reading Quora. I just needed to make sure there isn't some loophole. There's no loophole, Ashley. They're sloppy. You're protected. Let me work. But what if Ashley? She snapped a piece of gum, loud enough to cut through my panic. The only way you lose is if you start doubting me now. Do I sound unsure? She didn't. She sounded like a woman who'd once sued a telecom giant and won enough to buy a duplex in Silver Lake. I exhaled. Sorry. I keep thinking maybe I imagined it, like maybe I read it wrong. You didn't, she said. And even if you did, I didn't. And I'm better at this than they are. You think a guy like Greg reads contracts? That man probably signs his own birthday cards with a stamp. I hung up feeling slightly steadier. Not much, but enough to stay out of the Reddit rabbit holes for another few hours. Still, the wait was agonizing. Brenda didn't do half measures. She wasn't just slapping together a per your oversight email. No, she was crafting an experience. The kind of legal correspondence that made CFOs sweat through their dry clean-only slacks. Tone matters, she told me. We're not begging, we're not even demanding. We're educating them gently on how spectacularly they've FK'd up. Her plan was layered. First, quote the clause, direct and undeniable. Then, cite the moment in the exit interview when Greg repeated standard policy like a malfunctioning toy parrot. Then, and this was the piece de resistance, frame it as a breach of good faith. You don't have to disclose every benefit in a severance package, Brenda explained. When you hand someone a document that conveniently omits $1 million clause, it starts to smell like willful concealment. I felt like I was preparing for war, but my armor was made of bubble wrap and rapidly evaporating courage. Brenda, she was forging iron. Day 3, I cracked again. I texted her, what if they just ignore the letter, Brenda? Then I subpoena Greg and ask him to define standard policy in front of a judge. God, I loved her. On day 4, I drove by the office. Just once. Okay, 3 times. I parked across the street from the building where I'd spent over a decade, watching the tinted windows like they might confess. A delivery guy wheeled in a cart of catered lunch. Someone was celebrating something. Maybe Greg finally figured out how to CC an email. I stared at the building and felt it for the first time, detachment. That place didn't own me anymore. Couldn't hurt me unless I let it. What it could do, however, was pay me. Handsomely. Later that night, Brenda called. Just 2 words, it's ready. I held my breath. I'll send it in the morning. 9 a.m. sharp. Are you sure it's bulletproof? She interrupted. I even cited a precedent from 2015 where a company tried to do the same stunt and got legally pantsed in arbitration. We're not just asking for the shares, Ashley. We're planting a flag. We're telling them we see your games, we read the rules, and guess what? We're better at them. I hung up and stared at the ceiling until sunrise. Hope wasn't sharp anymore. It was heavy, thrumming, real. It hit their inboxes at exactly 9:0001 a.m. Brenda had it queued and ready like she was launching a missile. Subject line regarding equity clause and termination Ashley Moore. No exclamation points, no fluff, just a surgical, loaded phrase designed to make some poor executive assistant spill their cold brew. I was sitting on my couch, clutching a mug of coffee I wasn't drinking, watching the digital clock on my stove tick to 9:01. Brenda didn't text me right away. She'd warned me she wouldn't. Once it's sent, you go dark. Let them sweat. Let them stew. You'll want to know everything. You won't know anything. That's part of the fun. Fun wasn't exactly the word I'd use. Torture was closer. By 9:07, I had checked my email 6 times and convinced myself I'd lost Wi-Fi. By 9:12, I'd opened my phone settings just to see if maybe, just maybe, push notifications had turned themselves off like they were conspiring with Greg. By 10:30, my dog Maple was giving me a look that said, "You need to go outside before you explode." I didn't eat lunch that day. I nibbled on a cold Pop-Tart and tried to read a book, but every page was just a blur of words I couldn't absorb. The letter was out there now, floating in someone's inbox like a grenade with the pin pulled, and the silence was nuclear. I checked LinkedIn. Nothing. No activity from Greg. The CEO's profile still had the same smug headshot from 2016, back when the company was smaller and people still smiled at each other in the break room. No posts. No job changes. No reactions. At 3:42 p.m., I got a text from Brenda. Just 3 words, still quiet. Good. Quiet meant panic. Quiet meant back channels and internal threads, and who the hell approved this clause? Quiet meant they were in a room right now, reading the email, reading it again, and then printing it out and underlining things with a red pen like that would change the ink. I slept terribly that night. Half dreams of boardrooms on fire. Woke up at 2:14 a.m. convinced I'd missed a reply. I hadn't, still nothing. By morning, the waiting had become a second job. I made a spreadsheet titled Potential Outcomes just to keep my brain occupied. Column A, they cave immediately. Column B, they fight and lose. Column C, Greg gets fired, starts a podcast. Maple snored through most of my theorizing. At 10:06 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was a text from Kelsey, former coworker. Soft-spoken, ran point on internal comms. Hadn't heard from her since the day I was walked out. Her message was one word. OMG, that was it. No context, no emojis, just OMG. I stared at it so long the screen dimmed. My thumb hovered over the reply button, but I didn't hit send. My heart was pounding like I'd just been caught shoplifting hope. Another message from her followed 2 minutes later. You didn't hear it from me, but something's happening. That's when I knew the grenade had landed. Somewhere behind those polished glass doors, emails were being forwarded. Calendars were being cleared. Legal pads were being filled with frantic notes. Brenda's letter wasn't just a legal threat, it was a mirror held up to their own carelessness. And they did not like the reflection. I didn't know yet what they'd do, whether they'd fold or fight. But I knew one thing for sure, I wasn't the one sweating anymore. The call came in at 7:14 a.m. the next day. Too early for anyone to be civil, let alone him. I saw the name flash across my screen and almost didn't answer. Martin, my old boss, human wallpaper. A man who once called me his work wife in a meeting and then blamed me when I didn't laugh hard enough at his joke about women in IT. I let it ring once, twice. On the third, curiosity beat contempt. Hello? I answered, already bracing. There was no greeting. Ashley, what the hell did you do? His voice was ragged, not angry, panicked, like a man waking up in a burning house and realizing he's the one who left the stove on. I leaned back into the couch and sipped my coffee, suddenly calm. Morning, Martin, long time. Don't do that. Don't be smug. Jesus, do you have any idea what's happening here? Oh, I had ideas, plenty, but I let him flail. You blindsided them, he said, that letter. It's being passed around like a virus. Legals in a tailspin. I got pulled into a 6 a.m. meeting with the general counsel, the CFO, and God help me, Greg. I smiled into my mug. And here I thought Greg only worked banker's hours. This isn't funny, he snapped. Do you understand what those shares represent? The vesting clause? It triggered a reclassification of the entire equity pool. Finance is scrambling. They're saying your shares could account for nearly 13% of the last grant. I whistled low. I hadn't run the numbers yet. Brenda was still working through the fine print. But 13%? Didn't you all just announce a fresh options pool in that Q2 press release? I asked innocently. Martin groaned. Exactly. You were still on that list. You were supposed to phase out of eligibility after your next review cycle, but they forgot to update the roster in time. Your termination went through before the HRIS system processed the update. Oops, I said, deadpan. They're calling it an earnings impact. They're saying it might have to be disclosed. This isn't just about a payout anymore. It's about governance. There it was. They didn't just fire an employee. They accidentally handed me the keys to the back door of the ivory tower. And the CEO? I asked. Livid. He stormed out of the meeting. Said someone's head needs to roll. There's already talk of disciplinary action, maybe even a board inquiry. Greg looked like he was going to cry. That part almost made me laugh. Almost. You can't actually mean to push this, Ash, Martin continued, his voice cracking under the weight of his own cowardice. You got your severance. Why stir the pot? I let the silence hang a second too long before answering. Because you treated me like I was disposable, Martin. You thought I'd just nod and disappear. But I read the fine print. And you know what I found? He didn't respond. He knew. You didn't just kick me out, I said. You turned me into a shareholder with enough equity to be a problem. A big one. He exhaled like he'd just lost a court case and a custody battle at once. I liked you, Ashley, he said weakly. I leaned forward. You liked having me around to do your job for you. You liked not having to deal with details like contracts and clauses. But here's the thing about details, Martin. What? They don't care if you ignore them, they're still true. I ended the call without waiting for him to reply. I tossed my phone onto the couch cushion like it was buzzing with radiation. My pulse was calm, my mind sharp, focused. Up in that tower of glass and jargon, the walls were cracking. And all I did was read what they told me not to bother understanding. The email came in wrapped in the fakest civility I'd ever seen. Subject, request for discussion and clarification equity agreement from Executive Operations, not even a real person tone. Polished desperation masquerading as collegial collaboration. They wanted to review and clarify mutual understanding of contract language, which is corporate for, please come in before you legally dismantle us. Brenda read the email once, then once more out loud in her best fake sheer voice, like a preschool teacher announcing snack time after a fire drill. I especially love how they're calling it a discussion, she said, slamming her laptop shut. They're trying to get ahead of the train after they already heard the whistle and saw the smoke. We set the meeting for Friday morning. Same boardroom where they'd fired me. Same floor. Same potted ficus in the hallway that somehow still looked healthier than Greg. Walking in this time felt different. I wasn't escorted. I wasn't holding a cardboard box. I wasn't invisible. I was expected. Brenda led the way like a general entering enemy territory. She wore a navy blue suit that looked soft enough to pet but sharp enough to wound. I wore black, not funeral black, wore black. Inside, the room was packed. 6 people at the table, 2 at the wall with laptops. Legal had shown up armed. At the head sat the CEO, Dan Forsyth himself, tan, botoxed, and wearing the kind of apologetic expression that screams, I'm only sorry because I got caught. Greg was there too. He looked like someone had drained his blood and replaced it with La Croix. Pale, sweaty, a human oops. Dan stood. Ashley, thank you for coming. We appreciate the chance to speak in person. Brenda dropped her binder on the table. Thud. Let's talk about this standard policy you've been waving around like it replaces contract law. Silence. She reached forward, tapped her laptop, and a projector screen blinked to life behind us. Up came the clause highlighted, underlined, annotated, legally weaponized. All unvested shares shall become fully vested upon termination without cause, Brenda read aloud like she was quoting scripture at a heretic. One of the lawyers opened his mouth, but she raised a finger. We'll get to you. I want to hear from Greg first. He looked like a possum that just realized the headlights weren't slowing down. I didn't see this clause at the time, he stammered. It wasn't in the severance template, Brenda clicked her pen. And yet, it was in her original signed agreement, which supersedes internal templates. Unless, of course, your team's definition of good faith includes deliberate omission of critical compensation terms, a murmur at the end of the table. One of the assistants coughed into their hand. CEO leaned forward. Look, we're not here to debate language. We're here to make this right. Brenda smiled without humor. Then we'll start by acknowledging that the shares vested the moment you terminated Miss Moore. One of the legal drones finally found his voice. We could discuss an alternative arrangement. A buyback, perhaps, no? I said, and every head turned. It was the first time I'd spoken. My voice didn't shake. I'm not here to sell them. I'm not here to back down. I'm here to remind you I was never your mistake. I was your blind spot, and now I'm your problem. Brenda nodded approvingly like a coach watching her star player hit a home run. Dan rubbed his temple. Ashley, we're trying to be reasonable, Brenda echoed. Right, you know what else would have been reasonable? Including that clause in her exit paperwork? Or not firing someone without reading the damn contract? Or, I don't know, not letting Greg handle anything more complex than a coffee order. Greg visibly winced. I almost felt bad. Almost. The meeting went on for another 40 minutes. Legal tap danced, Brenda throat punched verbally, of course, and I watched the balance of power tilt, and then finally, unmistakably, crash down like a seesaw dropped by gravity and regret. They weren't in control. They weren't even pretending anymore. And the best part, still hadn't even named our price. It was supposed to be a negotiation. That's how they framed it in the invite, how they pitched it when we walked in. Let's work together to resolve this. What they meant was let's see how little we can pay to make this go away. And when they realized that wasn't going to happen, they got nervous, then desperate. By the time the fourth lawyer in a row had tried to sell us on the spirit of the agreement, Brenda was audibly laughing. I'm sorry, she said, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. Did you just say spirit of the agreement? Because I don't know if you're aware, but courts don't award damages based on vibes. She turned her laptop around again and pointed to the clause, now printed, highlighted, and tabbed like it was being inducted into the Legal Hall of Fame. This isn't ambiguous. This isn't negotiable. This is what you signed, what your CEO initialed, what your board approved. This clause is a loaded gun, and you put it in her hands the second you walked her out with a box of trinkets and a middle finger. The head legal counsel, a silver-haired man with a Rolex and an ulcer forming in real time, adjusted his tie and tried again. Well, when we reviewed the intent, Brenda cocked her head. Your intent was to fire her without paying what she was owed. Fortunately for us, California contract law doesn't give a damn about intent. It only cares about what's written. The CEO exhaled hard and leaned forward, fingers steepled like a sitcom villain who just realized the audience was no longer rooting for him. Look, he said, we don't want to fight. We're prepared to make a generous offer to resolve this quickly. He nodded to one of the lawyers who slid a folded sheet across the table. Brenda didn't touch it, neither did I, so he opened it himself. One-time payment, he said. Liquid value of the shares plus 20%. Clean. Final. We wire it today, you sign an NDA, and everyone walks away happy. I looked at the number. It was insulting. Maybe a third of what the shares were worth if I held them through Q4. Maybe a tenth of what they'd be if the company's pending merger went through. It wasn't an offer. It was a muzzle with a ribbon on it. I looked him dead in the eyes. No, his smile faltered. No, I said calmly. That's not even close. And I'm not interested in silence. I turned to Brenda. She straightened her blazer like she'd been waiting for the green light. Let me be clear, she said, her tone now cold and precise. You have two options. Option 1, by close of business today, you wire the full market value of all vested shares, dated from the day of her termination, without condition. No NDA, no strings, just compensation. A long pause, the room went still. And option 2, one of the lawyers asked, already afraid to hear it. Brenda smiled. Option 2, she keeps the shares, becomes an active shareholder. Starts filing motions. The first, a demand to audit the company's employee termination practices, specifically those related to equity suppression. We'll also be asking for board meeting minutes, executive comp plans, and Greg's training credentials. Greg whimpered. And just so we're all aligned, she added sweetly, I'll be exercising those rights publicly. Which means press coverage, which means shareholder calls, which means the words bad faith termination and governance failure start appearing in places your investors can see. The color drained from the CEO's face like someone had unplugged him. I leaned in, folding my hands neatly. You treated me like I was disposable, I said. Now I'm the crack in your balance sheet, so either pay me what I'm owed. Watch me sit in the next shareholders meeting and ask Greg to define standard policy on the record. Dead silence. Then the CEO turned to legal and said, voice tight as piano wire, draft the wire paperwork. No handshake, no apology, just an ending. As we walked out past the same receptionist who once asked me to refill the coffee pod drawer, I felt lighter than I had in months. Brenda nudged me as the elevator doors opened. They'll remember this one, she said. You didn't just get even, you got equity. And when the wire hit my account 4 hours later, 7 digits deep, I didn't pop champagne or post a humble brag on LinkedIn. I just fed Maple a second dinner and deleted every email folder with that company's name on it. They erased me. And I came back as a shareholder. Appreciate you sticking around, you legends of the break room. Subscribe for more chaos. Let's make your old managers spill their coffee in fear.